let's set the stage. You're working as part of a team, a cross-functional team with multiple leaders, working with engineering. You're starting a long, ambiguous journey from point A to point Z. And at point Z, you have this customer for whom your ability to deliver is going to be critical to their success. You're going to experience many zigzags along the way. And you're only one of several such peer teams making a similar journey with that same customer destination. So congratulations, you're either part of a product team at a large corporation, or maybe you're part of a merchant crew in 1942, the pivotal year in World War II. And your mission is to travel across the North Atlantic to deliver supplies to a besieged Britain, the oil that they need to keep their wartime economy running, and the food and other supplies that are going to sustain the civilian population. Your leader is this man, Admiral Ernest J. King. He's had quite the last 4 weeks. 2 weeks ago, he was appointed to be the commander of the US fleet. 2 weeks before that was Pearl Harbor. So he's got a lot on his mind. Imagine for a moment that we have created a time machine that will let us communicate with Admiral King. But also imagine that is the lamest time machine that you could conceive of, because all it can do is transmit management best practices. So we take this time machine and we send the practice of OKRs, objectives and key results, back through the ages. And he starts to outlay what are going to be his objectives for 1942. One of his critical objectives is to keep England safe and supplied. That's a good, outcome-oriented objective. And his key results might have looked something like this: a delivery of so much goods, they're estimating it, they'll put the value in later, new ship construction, and importantly, to protect the merchants that are doing this sailing. So after a quarter, how was he doing? Well, in January, just in 2 weeks, 25 ships were sunk, with a totaling at 200,000 tons. 70% of those were those oil tankers that were so vital. In February, another 430,000 tons were sunk. In some cases, these sinkings were happening within clear sight of coastal residents. This image is from a ship that was sunk off the coast of my home state of New Jersey. The enemy submarine commanders who hunted these merchantmen called this a happy time, or the American shooting season. Their targets were so plentiful, they were told to conserve their limited torpedoes for only the biggest ships and the tankers. I hope none of you have had the misfortune of working for a leader who would look at these results and say, we're on track, no need to change. Historians weren't that impressed with Admiral King's speed in making a change, but change did come. It came first in terms of public education, reminding folks not to divulge information about sailings and timing, and also enforcing coastal blackouts so that ships sailing along the coastline wouldn't be silhouetted and then easily spotted by submarines. But the most critical decision that was made was to institute a common system for defense, the Convoy System. In a convoy system, the ships all travel together, initially in groups of just a couple of dozen, but by the time of the war's end, more than 100 at once. And they would be escorted by warships specifically tasked with their protection. Two key principles guided the system. First, that in the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, where sighting visually was key to detection, putting the groups together more densely would make it less frequent that they would be observed and targeted. And then secondly, that being in convoy guaranteed some degree of protection, as there simply weren't sufficient escorts available to accompany each and every individual merchant ship. So the idea was to take many eggs, put them all in one basket, and then protect those eggs a little bit more strongly. Okay, let's leave the cold of the North Atlantic, we'll stow our life vests, and we'll come back to a much more comfortable modern-day product team context, where the life and death stakes are not so obvious and immediate. And we'll trade the Convoy system for a design system, and consider a different version of trying to kind of maneuver a lot of people at once. We're thinking about how do we employ change throughout a company at a wide scale. Let's give ourselves a really positive context to start from. Your company's already seen the light. They've staffed a central UX team. It might not be big. It might not be guaranteed to exist for a long time. Maybe it's just kind of knit together of those free radicals that exist within an org, those kind of unique, highly reactive individuals who always find each other. The team has created a design system, and they've tested it. They have research that shows that it works for users. And they've even maybe gotten agreement that it's a good expression of your brand. And finally, let's even say that there's some degree of sponsorship. At least within their immediate organization, there's agreement that this is a course worth taking. But now the team faces a new set of challenges as they try to think about how to deploy this design solution at scale. This is exactly the challenge that faced the material design team back in 2018 as we started to roll out something that we called Google Material. This was our flavor of the material design system that was expressly tied to Google's set of brand attributes and personality. While we had all of that supporting positive stuff I just talked about on the last slide, that doesn't mean that we had a course plotted for us. We still had to figure that out. So like Admiral King, we had a mandate, ours in the form of a company-wide OKR. But we also had a lot of challenges. How do we do this across 200 or so Google products, some of which have individual teams for different platforms that they launch on? We also knew that we were influencing the work of literally thousands of other UXers at the company. And we were already on the clock. We announced this in February, and it was due at the end of the year. I'm going to share some of the big lessons that we took away from this multi-year journey, our strategies for navigating design scale at change, or design change at scale. And along the way, I'm going to highlight a few of the UX values that we hold at Google to give you a sense of how an organization's culture can inform how you approach this challenge. Okay, the first strategy is to align people with a shared vision and language. Now, people here should be really wide-ranging, not just designers. You want to think about engineers, product managers, program managers. Because all of them, whatever team they are going to have one question for you. You want to lead. Why do I want to follow? For anything you do at a company-wide scale, there's going to be one answer that's most obvious and immediate, and that's consistency. With Google Material, we want to have this consistent application or presentation of our brand to our users. When a user has a positive experience in one context, we want that to be the jumping off point for the next one. And if we string enough of those together and we actually satisfy user needs, we start to build trust. That's the goal. But don't let consistency be the only argument that you're making. Make the full argument. You might be offering more than just brand alignment or a common design system. Are you offering greater efficiency? Are you making life easier for these product teams? Are you avoiding the confusion that comes from a fragmented or conflicting design efforts? Are you offering greater quality? Maybe your solution comes with more accessibility built in. You're actually addressing the needs of a wider array of users. Or maybe the elements are more robustly tested. And finally, maybe it's greater speed. Once adopted, is it going to be faster for teams to continue to make changes from this baseline? Are you really granting them agility in addition to velocity? One tactic you can take is to show a pretty clear example of the problem you're addressing. One where it's easier for everyone to agree this is bad. This is a slide we like to use a lot, which is to show these two images and ask the question, which one is the Google product? And even if you're in the front of the room, it doesn't get any easier. It's very hard to tell, and in fact, our users were quite confused about this. They would confuse the Google app with the non-Google one, and vice versa. It works badly both ways. Now, I'm not suggesting that fear is the only way to motivate people. You could also try hope. You've shown the scary today. Maybe you can also show the promising tomorrow. And here you can show and tell. You want to talk about what data you've already collected that indicates that this proposed solution is going to be promising for users. So for Google Material, we did user sentiment research, speaking to some of our core brand attributes. And what we found was that users generally felt more positively about our brand, and they judged this particular embodiment to be more useful, more predictable, and more intuitive. Showing other teams this kind of value, what the change is going to mean for them, for their users, for their product, is really important. Shared language starts with the name that you choose as you start to evangelize this work throughout your company. The brand here is actually subtly more important than you might think because you're competing in this arena of many code names and acronyms, and you want to be able to stand out. In my 20-plus years in the field, I've seen many large-scale UX efforts, and for reasons I will never fully understand. A large number of them are named for mountains. It is the great unifier of our industry that we want to name these projects for things that people ascend and die on every year. So apologies to anyone currently on a Matterhorn or a K2 or a Federation Peak. I've survived 3 Everests at 3 companies. When you stick with a code name that's been generated from the team that's initiating that work, you're likely to choose something that's appealing or amusing to them. I instead suggest that you turn around and think about either the user perspective or the perspective of the team that is going to be affecting this change. Google material may not be sexy to everyone, but it's better than Google's branded UI design system, and it even abbreviates this down to GM. The second strategy is you want to build a coalition of willing allies. You can keep it small at start to move quickly, but you should recognize pretty quickly on that if you want to go far, you need to go together. This speaks to one of our Google UX values, which is to include. We believe that our craft is most valuable when it is most inclusive. When we introduce new voices or we amplify less heard ones, our process improves. Choosing to include, to build a coalition, doesn't mean you have to bring everyone at once. So this is a cruising order for Convoy HX202 from August of 1942. It describes how the individual ships would be arranged within the convoy during the transit. Now, vessels had eligibility requirements in order to participate in convoy. Depending on the speed they can maintain, they might be slotted to a fast or a slow convoy. And it was also important to look at how much smoke they produce, because smoke is one of the things that could easily give the ships away, because it could be spotted up to 40 miles away. So a heavy smoker brought more risk to other ships in the convoy. When you get to pick your key partners, you can be really selective, especially early on. So try to pick partners who are truly essential to the business, ones that would be really hard to ignore. At Google, if it's not going to work for search, it's probably not going to work for Google. You can also think about teams who might be most threatened by the change. This might not be a product team. What about your peers in marketing or engineering? And look to see if there are others in the company who might already be facing similar challenges. Maybe they're looking at a different aspect of the problem or solving it in a slightly different way. We had, at the time, an effort going on to unify all the productivity apps at Google, so we just linked into that. And then finally, think about where you might have a blind spot. When we started working with the Google Play team, which does media apps like music and movies, it became pretty apparent that there was this interesting collision between Google's brands and the content providers that showed up so heavily in those spaces. So use that coalition to help challenge your thinking. You already know what you know. What you're interested in is what you don't know yet. So put yourselves into situations where you can expand your thinking there. Part of that inclusion is getting to the point of comfort with other teams where you can ask questions that are uncomfortable for your own central team. Where does our solution break? What did we miss? Where are we wrong? The feedback that you get early on will help you make that expansion to the next partner that much easier and more natural. Now, wait a second, you're thinking. You are up here telling us about winning over allies and convincing people, but you had a mandate. We saw it. You showed the slide. And that's true, but I want to offer a strong warning here. Your central UX team has volunteered for this mission. They may even have been created specifically for this job. They're excited about what this could mean. A mandate conscripts everybody else, their opinions be damned, into the same mission. Do you know the true cost of what you're asking other teams to do? You have a responsibility to be careful about what you're asking and how that can force other UX teams into burning the capital they've built up within their own organizations with their product and engineering teams. Which leads to our next strategy. Make sure you're equipping your team with the right tools. Give them as much support as you can to help them reduce that price that they're going to pay. You can't remove it completely, but anything you can do to lower that cost is going to win a lot of goodwill from them. To do that support, you need to expand your thinking from beyond the standards of here's your sticker sheet, your design principles, and your spec. What about supporting research? What can you share there that you've already done? Can you offer operational guidance on how to apply the design guidance? And did you consider integration with product tools that are already in development? By being expansive, by thinking about the larger community needs, you can really help. And keep in mind that the casual artifacts that your team already uses, they may not be pretty, they're practical, but they're not polished. If you see utility in them, other teams may see that as well. For convoys, the escorts were not the only form of support that came. Another tool that was used were rescue ships. These are converted freighters, and they would sail at the rear of the convoy. That way, if any ships in front were disabled or sinking, they would come along and they would rescue any of the sailors from those vessels. Over the course of the war, just about 24 of the ships like this rescued more than 4,000 sailors from a dire fate. So ask yourself, how can I help rescue these product teams in a similar way? Be comfortable knowing that you're going to improvise along the route. When you feel like you have the right solution, and especially when you are already in a place of selling the right solution, it is natural to discourage kind of more creative feedback at that point. You need to stay open. You need to be available to see possibilities that you hadn't considered and see how they can inform that solution. So don't be precious. Celebrate the mistakes that you will make. You will make them. Because they're a beautiful part of the process. You want to strive not to just get things done. You want to get things done right. So one example of that is, and it took me a while to realize this, it's almost an oxymoron, but customization is consistency's best friend. I think it's a mistake that a lot of design solutions make early on, is to be very narrow-minded about consistency. We've given you the rules, now you need to follow them. Remember always that the goal is not to make everything the same. It's to make a great experience, and helping to build consistency along the way is one tool that you can apply, but it's not an absolute dictate that you have to follow. When you take a too rigid approach, you risk offering a one-size-fits-all solution that really could be at odds with what a product is trying to do and could ultimately actually be in conflict with the users. Granting enough customization is a really tricky balance, but it's an essential one to strive for. In our most recent public release of material design, we emphasized this through the introduction of material theming, letting third parties customize the expression in the material design system through color and font typography and shape to bear the style of their brand and make it more suitable for their audience and create more distinction from Google's. Flexibility can also apply to how you time a major design change. Like the fast and slow convoys, there are ways to respect the fact that different teams move at different paces. Now, sometimes you don't have that luxury. In the prior talk, there was kind of a little discussion about the Google logo here. This was something that the material design team worked on for a while. And it's, imagine it's a pretty big enterprise. You're going to have to collect together all of the digital assets all across the company that reference the logo in some way. And you want to make that change as broadly and as quickly as possible. If you think that software part is hard, have the fun conversation with the physical environment team who just poured the old logo in concrete at scale outside the building. It's good times. In my experience, change can come more smoothly and with higher quality when you show more flexibility to your partner teams. So was there already a product design or a product redesign set somewhere in the future on the roadmap? Great, you can hold for that. Did they just do a redesign? Well, in that case, there's probably this feature backlog that's been built up, and that team's under a lot of pressure. So be sensitive to that. You can help by offering what the simplest, safest, smallest set of changes would be, and recognize that you'll pay parts of that cost later then. As you think of the team's journey of adoption, the steps along the way might get viewed as tiers. So for Google Material, we had basic and then intermediate and then advanced compliance. So achieving the most basic governance would count as that team fulfilling their share of the OKR, and other parts would follow. And by the way, get used to saying compliance or governance. If you're a central team, you're going to use these terms all the time. Our fifth strategy is measurement. How will you be able to tell that change is happening? If it's worth doing, it's worth measuring. So measurement can be important in a few ways. One is very immediate for your own team. How do they get that morale boost for knowing that they've done something that's had an impact within the org? Measurement's a great way to get there. It's also important to be able to demonstrate that progress to leadership. If there was any degree of mandate, it wasn't leadership basically saying, yeah, you've got this, we'll come back in a year, check in on it. That's never how that happens. They're going to need to know. They're going to want those quarterly, monthly, weekly updates. Where's the dashboard? How do I know how this is doing? Measurement gives you a way to address that. And then finally, it helps to build the value, and I do mean like the economic value of what the UX team is doing. And having numbers and not just the intuition or the feel or saying the brand looks better is important, especially in times of budget or headcount austerity. Because you never know. You're just trying to future-proof yourself for that next difficult quarter, which might be just months away. So recognizing where that solution is being embraced and where it's being held at arm's length is really an important signal. Don't be too quick to judge an individual or a team or even a whole division for holding off or showing resistance to the solution, or just blaming it on it's organizational politics. Turn it around. We're designers. We're good at thinking from the user's perspective. Is there something intrinsic to the solution that you're offering that's causing this resistance? Is there something that you're missing? Having the courage to kind of ask the uncomfortable questions can help really illuminate what the problem is and keep you open to those same possibilities. These conversations help steer how we understand, how we think, and how we collaborate in a larger company. It sets a path for how disparate teams can really work together to mutually satisfy their common goals. For larger changes, I especially warn you to be careful about false binaries. Especially for a major change like a design system, a simple, we did it or we didn't, isn't much signal. You need to know more progress between those two endpoints. Okay, just brace yourselves for a dense spreadsheet in 3, 2, 1, boom. For Google Material, we did not want a checkbox. We wanted a scorecard. So we defined this grading rubric with dozens of criteria. And then we published it so that all these 200 plus product teams could do their self-assessment. So they could see, okay, where are we on the path? In a trust but verify model, of course. From this, we could still produce that OKR-friendly single value based on looking at their scorecard grade and weighting it by their number of users and track that regularly. Now, if your company is especially transparent, or if you're just bold, you can publish the results of this internally to everyone, not just the individual teams. And you can do that to create either kind of a sense of friendly or unfriendly competition between different teams, or even just to apply a little bit of peer pressure. Where there is success, those students with top marks at the head of the class, reward it. Be generous with redirecting credit away from the central team to those other partners. Yes, your team did a ton of difficult, invisible, innovative work, and they should be acknowledged for it. All those discarded directions, all the risk that was taken on even to attempt this project, all the abandoned paths, that's good. It should be recognized, it should be rewarded. But these company-scale design changes only happen because of the efforts of those partner teams. When you provide a central solution, you're not actually deploying anything to the users. It really relies on this partnership. From your central vantage point, you can be as blind to the challenges that they are facing in doing this work as they were to your work building it in the first place. So the final UX value that I want to highlight is to serve. I think for central teams especially, it's important to be humble. Your team will not have all the answers. And many of the problems that you face will be bigger than any one individual or team. But seeing the big dents that you can make in the context of tough challenges can really be encouraging to others to take on similar scale challenges. So recognizing the work done can be a source of inspiration to others. This is the Merchant Marine Distinguished Service Medal, which was the highest decoration that was given to merchantmen from the convoy era, civilians, and it was of similar esteem to military honors like the Victoria Cross or the Medal of Honor. When you see the build-upon accomplishments of your partner teams, you can recognize them. These are our material design awards that we introduced in the first year, initially thinking we would award these to third parties. They're doing a good job taking material and using it for their brands. But we quickly realized there was a huge opportunity to also recognize other internal teams that were doing fine work contributing into the system. As a central team, you have this unique opportunity to build up the reputation of your UX community. Your position naturally imbues you with a sense of authority that you then can easily grant to others. We sometimes joke that at performance review time within Google, it suddenly becomes a company of 100,000 go-to persons. But this idea that expertise can be exhibited by the many is not faulty at all. Okay, here again are the 6 strategies that I covered today, representing the experience of many folks on the material design team. I appreciate your time and attention on our journey together today, and I hope to chat with many of you later. Thank you.